We don't buy into any of those narratives. We're telling our own stories, but we are dangerous to society.
As I always say, not every woman will get pregnant, but every woman will go through menopause. It should be the one subject that women's magazines really speak about and embrace.
We played a small part in building the foundation.
How do you measure success now?
It's very much defined by my work.
What if midlife crisis wasn't a crisis, but a calling? That's the question more and more women across the globe are asking, and in fact, answering on their own terms. And that's exactly the kind of conversation we're going to have today. Welcome to the thegayulewispodcast, where we explore what it means to live well, empower with age, and also rewrite the wellness narrative for women across the globe. I'm Gayu Lewis, a menopause coach, a board-certified integrative nutrition health coach, and I believe that midlife is not the end of our story, but the beginning of our reinvention. Today's episode is incredibly special. I have not one, but two powerhouse women with me today, both with a journey that defines resilience, reinvention, and most of all, authenticity. First up, we've got Lisa Ray, a global icon, a celebrated actress, and above all, a woman who has navigated life's profound transitions with absolute grace. From her battle with cancer to her ongoing advocacy for wellness and holistic living, Lisa's story is a true testament to strength beyond the surface. Joining her today is Sujata Assomull, a renowned fashion journalist, former editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar India, and a true thought leader in the space of mindful fashion and storytelling. Through her work, Sujata has redefined the conversation around style, empowering women to approach fashion with authenticity, purpose, and pride at every stage of life. Together, we are opening up a conversation around reinvention, midlife transitions, and the power of embracing change, but on our own terms. Let's dive in. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today. I think it's an absolute honor for me having two powerhouse women sitting with me today. I want to actually start, by rewinding a little. Yeah, think back of your version when you were in your 20s or 30s. How would you have described yourself in one sentence?
In one sentence, in my 20s. Oh my gosh.
We're gobsmacked.
All over the place. I was simply all over the place. I didn't know what I was doing. Honestly, just running from pillar to post. That's how I would describe it.
I was lost. I was the lost lamb. Very similar to Sujata. But, the interesting thing is that we've known each other since we were about 17. And we both landed in Bombay before it became Mumbai. And we were both of Indian origin, very connected with India, but born and brought up abroad up until that point. So we had this very unique experience and viewpoint that nobody in India in those days had, because it was not glamorous to move to Bombay of the 90s.
This is the 90s, where everything was just starting. We were both at that time in fashion. There was no organized fashion industry. Both our work predates the first India Fashion Week, and everyone was finding their way, but there was a real sense of camaraderie also.
Okay.
We were working together. But I think for us, we're both also only children. And that was another point. And we became each other's sisters, I would say.
And we still are.
And there's also been serendipity in her life. She's moved away. She's walking down the streets of Milan, and guess who happens to be in Milan Fashion Week to cover it and bumps into her?
Yeah.
You.
Me. Or she's doing an acting course in London.
That
no one's going to meet her.
Yes.
Coming out of the tube station. We bump into each other again. And then cut to now in our 40s and 50s, where both of us have ended up in Dubai. She's followed me, as I say. You kind of followed me to Dubai.
That's right. Even though I'm the older one, I'm the older sister.
But you follow me. I came to Dubai first.
But I was in menopause first.
Oh, okay. You win that one.
There's a
You win that
competition there.
one.
If you want to get down to it. So, yeah, we have this unique history in it. And, it's absolutely true what Suja's saying, which is that Bombay was actually quite magical in the 90s. It was a period of time never to be repeated again. And again, because we were only children, we had to create a family. And we managed to put together a family, like friends like family, before there was such a concept within the nascent fashion industry, within the nascent entertainment industry. There was nothing. We actually, I guess, we played a small part in building like the foundation, putting literally the bricks and mortar
We were all
together.
multi-hyphenates without that word, like you're saying. These words didn't exist. I was a stylist. I was a writer.
Yeah.
I would do some television news. I would do voiceovers.
Yeah.
We were doing it all. And Lisa also, she was started maybe in modeling, but she was also acting. She was doing so many things. She was also a speaker. We were all multi-hyphenates without knowing each other, because really it wasn't that we wanted to be multi-hyphenates, we just didn't know where we were going and where we would end up, and we were just happy to try anything.
But there were also a lot of opportunities,
Yeah.
It was just kind of like blue sky thinking. We could jump in and do whatever we felt like doing in those days, because it wasn't an organized industry the way that it is
There were
today.
no expectations, because it wasn't.
And there were no expectations. It was actually glorious.
Yeah.
Even though we were lost children, it was like everything. It was not one particular thing. It was a mixture of wonder and curiosity and exploration. And at the same time, we had our dark periods, because you're in your 20s. Now, come on, who isn't messed up in their 20s?
Agreed. You had, both of you had great journeys, right? In your own journey, in your industries. But like you said, what was success for you then? And how do you measure success now?
I think success in my 20s and 30s was very much defined by my work, so that the job I had. So whether it was, suddenly being able to write for an international publication, or becoming the editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar, or getting a column in a newspaper that you've always wanted to have, and that kind of made your day. And now success is more about just me being happy and content. I'm not defined by anything external. Success to me is just being able to be at home by myself, be happy, or just, I don't know, just feeling fulfilled without anything having to happen. That is success for me today.
Like being in the moment.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think for me, success, I never had a clear idea or image of what I wanted to do in my life. And I became, I call myself an accidental actress, and it's actually true. I never planned on being in this business. I never craved it. I was an introvert. But it happened. And then it took on its own momentum. And, at some point I realized that I wanted to treat life like a movable feast, like from the Hemingway book. And that imagery has always stayed with me. And I find it's romantic, but it was true for that period of my life, that I wanted to sample a little bit of everything that was out there. And so it wasn't also just about conquering Bombay. It was about then moving on to London, and then living in Milan, and then living in Paris. And, as I said, sampling a little bit of everything that caught my attention. But it was also very self-centered, right? It was about me and what I wanted. And, I bounced around the world. And, if I was in a relationship, too bad, I'm moving to Milano now. Too bad, I'm moving to New York now. But, in some sense, I always say I got everything out of my system. There was no woulda, shoulda, coulda. So that when I did finally decide to settle down, when I met the man who was supposed to be my husband, I think I was ready to be a lot more grounded. I was ready to be in more partnership, to maybe compromise just a little bit. It was an unfamiliar notion for me to compromise. And it was really, really rough in the beginning of my marriage, because neither of us understood how to do that. We came together fairly late in life, relatively speaking. Not maybe by today's standards, but, I got married at like 39, 40. And that was when this notion of success really changed, because I did find that I was more rooted in not just my own needs, That was one part of it. But also in this idea of freedom, um, that I redefined my life by the amount of freedom I could access, So it wasn't necessarily the money. Yeah, the money was important, but why? Not because I was ever hung up on buying things, except maybe when I was in Hong Kong for a brief period of time. I bought a lot of branded shoes and
Oh, I
bags, and then I
remember
started feeling like
She
suffocated by
called
it.
me saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. I've become a Hong Kong type.
I become a tie,
Tie, I
which is,
remember.
a word for like these ladies who lunch. And I said, what happened to me? And I literally gave them away, much to the horror of my helpers at that time. But, and that was when I really was able to tap into my internal freedom. So I've always also been very spiritual, and I've always had this parallel life that is always about pursuing the inner life. And that started influencing my outer life more than my outer life influencing my internal life. So that freedom meant freedom from also things, freedom to be able to pursue what I wanted to. Freedom with your time is so precious. So money was a way of defining that, like, I get to decide my own schedule, but also an internal freedom that was so essential, freedom from other people's opinions, freedom from outside validation. So that is the essence of success for me today.
I think, yes, when you're younger, it's all about these society norms. Like Lisa said, getting married. I also got married. I got divorced too, but I also got married in my late 30s, like Lisa, and it was considered late. And today that's normal. And I think we all had these boxes we felt we had to tick in our 20s and 30s. Now there are no boxes I have to tick. The only thing I need to tick is keeping my heart happy. That's the only thing I need to tick right now.
That kind of leads me to the question, you spoke about the societal pressures in general. At what age of your life did you say, I'm not going to care about anything else that people say, and I'm going to live life in my own terms? Was there an age in your life that you were able to say that to yourself?
I think it comes slowly. I don't think you can say it happened when I was 42 or 43 or something. I think it happens kind of slowly over a time. And I think that time kind of also happens to collide when you're going through perimenopause and menopause. So I would always say that stage of life is a transition into that. And for me, that was around, I would say by like 47 is when I was in menopause. And that did coincide when I really came into my own and no longer cared. And I think that had I have known a lot of things earlier, it could have happened a little earlier. But things are just not spoken about. And that's something Lisa and I really believe is important. That's why we're talking about the issues, not the issues around midlifing, more celebrating midlifing.
Totally.
And celebrating this phase of life and how you need to know a few things and prepare for this from your 30s. The run-up is in your 30s.
Absolutely.
And I think if someone had prepared me, it would not have happened at 47. It might have happened at 40.
Or also, to like change the narrative, right?
Yeah.
How getting to midlife is the gift. That's the prize, for like, navigating your 20s where we're all confused. I have not met anyone who is not confused in their 20s.
I don't know anyone of my age who wants to go back and be in their 20s.
Yeah, that's
it's not of interest to any of us. It's possibly the most confusing and difficult phase, but also the most important phase because you learn a lot through those mistakes.
Totally.
And you become who you are through that time. So while I wouldn't want to go back there, I'm really glad for everything that I did in my 20s and all the mistakes I made. And believe me, there were many.
Yeah, I know. Except for the tight skin, maybe.
Except for...
That might be, I wish we could just, cherry pick what we could, carry over from my 20s. Not much, but tight skin.
Tight skin?
For me, I've always been a rebel. So I honestly never cared for people's validations. Sincerely, I was always very rebellious.
I think that's something we had in common. That if someone told us we had to do something, we would
do the opposite.
We would just run and do the exact opposite. I think perhaps in my 50s, I listened more to people than I ever did in my 20s.
It's
which
the opposite.
Sounds really strange.
I would have to agree. I think when I turned 40, I don't know, suddenly there was a switch in my head. I don't know. Otherwise, I would just speak whatever I wanted to speak. But I think now there's a filter. I don't know how it came, but it came when I turned 40.
I had no filter means I had
Yeah, she had
zero
no filter.
Nobody ever knew what was going to come out of that mouth of mine.
Suj
And now
was renowned for it.
I'm considered, and I think, and I wonder, and I think all my friends who knew me in my 20s and 30s were like, wow, Sujata grew up.
So that's the irony. I think for us, we were so open and frank and, unfiltered throughout a lot of our 20s. I don't think we felt as shackled by societal norms. And maybe, part of it is Bombay. Bombay actually encouraged that.
Also,
of the
we're
90s
so
of being
lucky
really
there was no
free.
social media, so there's no record
Yeah.
of it. I mean,
Yeah.
if I think about what I would have done with social media in my 20s and what I would have put up and what I would have said, it kind of scares me.
Notorious. Suj. We were pretty notorious in our youth. And the irony is that I've mellowed and I've become more considered, more compassionate right now. So I feel like sometimes we've gone the opposite way, because often in South Asian cultures, people talk about breaking free of that sense of like, I need validation or I can't use my voice. For us, we were very, very lippy. We were very, very...
We had opinions.
We're
still
very
do.
opinionated, and we still do. It just is, it's true, a more...
We just know how to deliver it.
It's a more mature version now, right?
And the way you deliver it is just with more compassion.
Yes.
True.
And I think that's something you really learn. It's not about not having an opinion. It's very important to everyone to have opinions. We have no problem if people disagree with us also. That's also important. That ignites conversations. But we just think that compassion is what's important.
Yeah, and that's what was missing in our 20s.
Midlife always has such a bad reputation, right? People say crisis
Why?
and stuff like that. What's one myth that you've heard and that made you laugh or maybe cry?
Well,
So
I
many.
was approached for a job in a very well-known media publication as I turned 40 by one of these headhunters. And I still remember them saying, oh, this is great. We love this. We think you're a perfect match. And then, can you send your CV? So I did. And then they called me and they were like, oh, you're about to turn 40. You don't look it. Which, by the way, is not a compliment at all to any woman. To tell a woman she doesn't look her age is not a compliment. We do look our age and we're proud of our ages. But more to the point, they were like, oh, but at 40, can you do this job? Will you understand the new way media is moving? At that time, it was Twitter and not Instagram. Will you understand this new social media spectrum? I don't know if we can propose you anymore. And that's, I think, where this whole thing first dropped in my head about the kind of stereotypes South Asians have against women and aging, particularly in media, which is meant to break taboos. Media itself is just full of these taboos by saying that a woman at 40 can't do this job, correct? And that's when I think it first dropped in my head. I mean, you look at editors and stuff all around the world, they're in their 50s and 60s. It's really in India where this whole age thing comes up. And it really made me wonder why.
I mean, it's hard to self-define. I don't necessarily sit here and think, oh, I'm at the midpoint of my life and now it's all downhill. I never have thought that. I've never considered that. But I find it's very helpful, the conversation today and the narrative today that we're bringing to light, Sujata and I, to just sort of say that we've actually all I'm feeling right now is incredibly empowered. I'm feeling the most powerful, the most beautiful, the most centered that I'd ever felt before in my life. I'm still ambitious about certain things. I'm not as restless. And basically, I finally have it all together, And I think it's not a coincidence that it's connected with midlife. And I think that there are very clear phases in your life and you have to sort of go through them in a linear way. Like if you don't experience your 20s in a particular way, then you won't appreciate certain aspects of your 30s, and then you won't appreciate certain aspects of your 40s. I thought the 40s were great. The 50s are even better. They're just banging. And I think that it almost puzzled me, it bewildered me that other women didn't feel the same way. And I think that that's where this sort of started. Because if I go simply by how I feel internally, as I said, it's the best I've ever felt before. And I do feel that expresses itself through myself that people do get from externally, they get that energy or they feel like I'm vibrant. And of course, then you always get this line that's like, oh, but you don't look your age, but you're so lucky, but you're this, but you're that. And I just want to shut them up. Because what does that mean, you don't look your age?
There's 50.
I want to look my age. I'm 53, and this is what I look like at 53. And I'm not trying to compare myself. I'm not trying to make anyone else feel bad or feel superior to me. I'm simply owning who I am at this age. And this is the time when women step into their power. And it's no small irony, I feel, that culturally this is when women are expected to step aside and become irrelevant. That's the cultural narrative. And it's because a woman who knows herself, who values herself, who doesn't need outside validation, is dangerous. We are dangerous creatures. We upset the status quo. We are not going to just buy things that you present to us. We are not going to say that I need to filter my face and my body to receive love. We don't buy into any of those narratives. We're telling our own stories, but we are dangerous to society. We are disruptors. And that's what makes it so much fun.
Yeah.
And that's part of what Sujata and I are trying to do and trying to encourage in other women of the same age. And maybe we've also been isolated. There's many other women who feel like us. I'm sure of that. But in a sense, there's never been a mass movement. This is, ironically, social media is a double-edged sword, as we all know. But ironically, because of social media, we're finding each other and we're able to come together as a community. And we're very excited about that.
No, it's good. Like you mentioned earlier, people never spoke about first of all, they never spoke about periods in first place. Then people became a little bit more okay with it. Then infertility got a little bit of limelight.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then now finally we're speaking about a phase called perimenopause.
I think perimenopause.
It's still a taboo. It's still a big taboo, right?
I think perimenopause and menopause coming into the limelight shows that finally we're breaking the barriers, that women are breaking the barriers. Because as you said, first we spoke about puberty and periods, and then there was this whole talk of periods, and then there was infertility and pregnancy and motherhood. But somehow menopause is only just beginning to be spoken about. And I think until we really understand that menopause is, as I always say, not every woman will get pregnant, but every woman will go through the menopause. It should be the one subject that women's magazines really speak about and embrace. And if they're saying it's because, it's only for an older person, they've got it wrong. Perimenopause starts at 35, particularly for South Asian women. We menopause earlier than our Western counterparts. And the preparation for this really will tell you how you lead the next chapters of your life.
Absolutely. I mean, as a menopause coach, that's exactly what I coach or try to educate the women. But like you mentioned, people always spoke about, like when you spoke about menopause, they'll be like, oh no, I'm too early to hit menopause. But I'm like, there's a long journey. It's called perimenopause. Till probably a year ago, nobody knew this term. 100%. People just knew that menopause is sometime when I will stop menstruating. That's exactly what people thought. And whereas this journey was just, the earlier journey was never discussed. Now people understand that. And when I tell people menopause is actually
thank
one day.
God.
I only heard about the term perimenopause when I'd menopause. So it was too late for me to do anything about my perimenopause. I wish I had heard the term when I was in perimenopause, but no one used it then.
And we can't tell you about the amount of DMs we get and friends who reach out to say, I think now I understand why I'm acting like this, why I feel like this, why am I crying? My husband's been wondering what's wrong with me. My friends have been wondering what's wrong with me. Finally, I understand I'm in perimenopause. And so many women have had to go through so much agony for so many years. They've been gaslit, or they've had to just, or live
through it.
Live through it, bear it, become a martyr. And that's another story in our society that we want to shut that story.
Totally.
We want to stop this sort of martyrdom that is expected of South Asian women. Like there's an anecdote. I was actually working with someone. I was filming something with someone here in Dubai, and the gentleman who was the videographer was in his 40s, and before we started filming, she spoke to me. She said, I really appreciate you talking on this topic. And it kind of, it actually triggered him. He said, menopause. Oh, why? What's so interesting about menopause? And I said, well, what's your opinion on it? He said, well, my mother, I don't think she went through it because she never told me. Ladli beti, beta, oh, beta, no, I'm fine. So I actually turned the conversation. The old me again, 20-year-old would have bit his head off. But I said, tell me a little bit about that. What do you mean? She must have gone through menopause. She simply didn't have the support system. She went through it silently. He said, yeah, didn't that mean that it was okay? She never brought it up. I said, no, she had nobody to support her. Yeah. She had no one to lean on. And clearly her own son would have probably dismissed it. And, by the end of it, he actually turned around and he said, you know what? More men need to know this. Yeah. It's really important. So as much as we are creating this conversation, I think it really is equally important for like partners and husbands and men and boyfriend to be educated in this.
Yeah. I did a video on UTIs and menopause. And I was sitting at a restaurant and this woman came up to me and said, thank you so much for doing that video. I showed it to my husband because I didn't know how to address this issue. Now, if you cannot address this issue with your life partner, I mean, that's really, really sad. And that is something we've got to rewrite and we've got to change the narrative. We've got to be able to speak about this openly with everyone. And that starts with the people closest to you at home. And they're often the people that's hardest for you to speak to. But that's also why I believe it's really important to have a really good band of girlfriends at this point. And there's nothing more important than your girlfriends at this stage of your life. And I really encourage women to share their experiences. Yeah. If they don't want to put it out there on social media, that's fine. I totally respect that. But share it within your group. Because unless you talk about it within your group, there's no way you're going to know it. And if you have daughters, it's really important to keep these records because so much of this is based on your genes. So much of menopause is based. I don't have records of my mother and grandmother because it just wasn't done in that day. But I think we can do so much by documenting it to help future generations. And that's something most women don't even realize, that they need to keep their blood tests. They need to keep track of what their symptoms and treatments they've gone through. It's going to help their daughters.
And, in the grand scheme of things, banding together, creating this sisterhood is going to push or change, again, the conversation around women's health in general, which is so neglected, particularly after a certain stage. Why is women's health been dismissed? Why has, basically menopause and symptoms of perimenopause, most doctors are not educated in this. They won't know. They'll also dismiss you. There's a really interesting book that's come out called The Menopausal Brain, which is based on the research done by, maybe you've heard of Dr. Lisa Mosconi. Yeah, I'm sure I'm speaking to the converted, right? But, the fact is that she had to take it upon herself, this research, to actually, initiate this because no other doctors or traditional medicine was just dismissing it. That there are significant changes that happen in a woman's brain during menopause. And again, women's health completely underfunded, overlooked. We've got to change that. And we're only going to change that when we come together and start changing the narrative. And I often, I kind of equate it to, for instance, what happened around breast cancer. Breast cancer is a very powerful movement. Everyone now today knows pink breast cancer. Why? Because women got together and said, we're fed up. We don't want this anymore. And often what we talk about is like, if a man went through perimenopause, you can bet that there would have been billions of money put forward into this, right?
There'd also be like perimenopause leave and menopause leave if men had to go through it. The whole world's structure would change. But because it's women, we're just meant to quietly and go through it. And that's apparently the elegant thing to do. You know
and
what
not
I mean?
Speak about it, right?
Not speak.
Or if you got menstrual cramps, don't show it. It's sign of weakness and stuff like that. Yeah, but that's the whole thing, right? Like you said, I do quite a bit on the corporate coaching, and I always say if men had menopause, there would already be a health policy, in companies. They don't really look at.
There'd be a global policy on it. Overnight, you know what I mean? If men had to go through it. So I think that's something that we really need to talk about, that women need support and it's natural to need support, and don't feel like a weak woman because you need support at this time. You're just a normal woman, and actually asking for that support is empowering. that makes you an empowered woman.
I like what you said, but how many women are actually ready to accept the weakness? Because I always feel women have this very high ego in terms of, I am the best mom, I'm going to be the best
I
daughter, the
don't think
best
it's
wife.
ego. I think it's conditioning. I think
Yeah, it's not ego.
women were conditioned to believe the right thing to do is to just sail through this. The right way to be a woman is not speak about it. That's how you age, as they called, gracefully. And why are women told to age gracefully? I've never heard a man told you need to age gracefully. But women, no, we have to age gracefully.
It's the narrative that we're fed, but I don't agree with you in this, Gayu. It's not weakness. That's, again, the wrong. It's vulnerability.
Yeah.
And vulnerability is a strength.
I
As
agree.
we all know. Actually choosing to be authentic and vulnerable means you are Teflon, because you are presenting you're removing all the masks. There's actually no way that anyone can, in that sense, affect you or hurt you. So why are we saying weakness? It's not weakness. I never want to hear that word actually in this context. Because do you think asking for help is weakness?
No, I don't believe. I ask for every
But
help
no,
and
but I'm
possible.
saying obviously women in South Asian women think that.
That's what we want to rewrite and rebrand.
Has to change. Vulnerability is very different from weakness.
Menopause is not weakness.
100%.
It's simply a time of beautiful transition and change that, yes, it comes with its any times of change comes with hiccups and some pain, but through the pain comes something beautiful.
Yeah, like menopause is a natural phase. Like it's not something that you've done and you're going to get it. It's you were born with, a uterus. You're 100% going to go through a menopause.
Menopause is coming for every woman. It is inevitable.
Yeah.
So you better just get with the program. But I also think one thing that really bothers me is that when people talk about midlifing, it's always just around menopause. And there is so much more. Yes, menopause is such a huge part of your midlife. But it's one part of your midlife, this time is, for men, it's when they're peaking in their careers. For women, it really is their prime time. Perhaps it's a time when your children are more grown up, where you can spend more time on yourselves, or it's a time when you have more economic independence. It always really irks me that fashion brands always always are trying to aim their products at younger people, yet we have more money than them.
We have the buying capacity.
Yeah, we're the ones who want, have the ability to spend right now, and we've worked really hard to spend. Yet they don't want to target us. They want to target the younger consumer, and I've never understood that.
You always think about that, right? But at least the guys in the Louis Vuitton are not the young kids. They are the women in the 40s or 30s. You have the spending power. That's true. But just wanted to get an idea about. We spoke about your journeys. What does your wellness journey look like? Has it changed? Of course, I'm saying you said 20, both of you were rebels. How has your wellness journey changed?
Well, mine has changed dramatically, and I've been very public about my health struggles. I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, blood cancer, in 2009 when I was 37. And that also, the treatment put me into premature menopause. And that's termed as chemo-induced or disease-induced menopause. And that's another aspect of menopause that is very rarely covered, or at least I haven't heard it covered. So in a strange way, being diagnosed with a really dire disease really taught me finally to take responsibility for myself. And I rebuilt myself from there. The healing journey is ongoing. I'm very public about it, but I would say that really it's at the top of my priorities right now is my self-love, my health. I've just come back from a retreat, a naturopathic retreat, and I do that at least once a year. I do everything that suits me, but it's taken me time to get to this place where I don't feel I have to also blindly follow trends or advice. And we're living in a time where it's a little bit dangerous because we get a lot of advice off of social media, and it's kind of half-assed advice sometimes. Or like, let me try this, let me try creatine, let me try this, without really understanding that I find it's about simplicity now. I listened to my body. It took me a long time because the reason why I was diagnosed is because I was not listening to my body. So obviously one of the biggest aspects that I had to change was being able to tune in, to be very quiet, and to actually be in relationship with my body and listen to what it was telling me. So when you take your cues from your body, actually that's all you have to do. My body almost really will tell me what I need to eat, when I need to eat, when I need to sleep, when I'm sleep deprived, when I need to exercise, when I need to rest. So I've created a more simple, natural rhythm, and I have 2 young children. So, that also has to be incorporated into my daily routine. But I am a fan of simplifying. I am not a fan of health hacks, to be honest. At this stage of my life, but it's taken me a long time to get here.
I would say wellness is now a non-negotiable for me. I won't skip out my workouts. I won't skip a meal that I need to eat. I won't skip that time, even if it is to do my beauty regime in the morning, because that's that 10 minutes of whatever it is for me. I think what you realize is that wellness has to be a non-negotiable, and it's that simple. And that takes you time to realize, because you do abuse your body in your 20s and 30s. And that is the time to do it. So I'm not saying don't go out and do it. Go out and have all the fun you want when in your 20s and 30s. Because believe me, recovering from it in your 40s and 50s isn't going to be easy. So get it out of your system. But yeah, wellness is definitely, I would say, it's a priority. And I think when you're younger and you ask somebody what their priority is, they may say it's their relationship, their career, the first 2. But now I would say it's my number one priority.
It's front and center. Yeah. And I love it because Suj and I, we were at an event the other day, and everyone came dressed up, and it was actually an event around wellness. And Suj came straight from the gym. I loved it. She had her cap on, she had her workout gear, and she said, "Sorry, but I've come straight from the gym."
And my T-shirt read "Invincible."
Did they have the song?
We need that motivation.
You spoke about social media, but does social media put a lot of pressure on women that they need to look a certain way? Even if, you're in your 40s, you see a lot of celebrities, or you probably see a lot of people going through, doing something on their face like Botox and stuff. Does it put a lot of pressure?
One of the reasons I started my sort of primetime series was because everyone I was seeing on social media was super fit, really beautiful looking 50 and 60-year-olds. I mean, like
models who had just aged into their 50s.
And not all of us are like that. You know what I mean? And the point is, yes, there are exceptions to the rule, but most of us are just normal women. And I would love to see more mid-sized, mid-aged, normal women out there on social media, because I think it's really important for us to redress the whole beauty standard myth. You know what I mean? That this is what this age looks like. And there's a beauty in our age. There is a beauty. These wrinkles, I remember reading somewhere that your wrinkles are your medals. And I now look at them that way. My wrinkles are my medals. I've worked hard to get them. There's a beauty in our imperfections. And I really think that needs to be celebrated.
I remember you used to talk about there's nothing called flawless skin. We're not dolls. At the end of the day,
flawless skin. I mean, this whole use. I mean, there are so many beauty words I hate, and flawless top is one of the top of the list. But because we have pores, we have texture. No matter what age you are, you can't have flawless skin. Even when you're a baby, your skin is not flawless. There's always something in your skin, and I think we really need to stop using these words like flawless. It's actually what's making the younger generation have these impossible beauty standards. And it's up to us to be responsible for the next generation, right? Yeah. So we need to redress this.
I mean, I'll tell you what worries me is we have context. We are the pre-digital generation, or like the sandwich generation. And we have lived our life IRL, in real life. And when I see the next generation, that's where I see the impact of social media. And social media ultimately is just a tool. It's how do you use it? What's your relationship with social media? But, to give you context, having been in front of the camera for so long, and when I started out, there was no Photoshop, right? What you saw was what you got. I mean, for sure, we wore makeup and we had great lighting, but we were undoctored, right? And today, pretty much, I would say what, 90% of the images that you see on social media are doctored in some way. I mean, putting on a filter is, look, I also put on filters sometimes. I'm not, I'm not saying I'm above doing that, but I understand the difference. And I'm not looking for that perfection. I've lived a very whole life, even as a model, I owned my perfections. And I always thought it's really strange that I'm a model because I don't have the perfect build, the perfect height, the perfect body, the perfect face. Far from it, I photograph well. And I've always known that. But I mean, just this anecdote that I was telling Sujata about that I found distressing. A young girl who we're very close to, her family. And she was just asking me the other day, she said, so Mashi, which, okay, I'll take Mashi over auntie. So Mashi, is it true that in your day, the models and the actresses did not have plastic surgery? I mean, I was literally like, what kind of question is that? Because, we are from that generation. We did not doctor ourselves to that much, to that extent. And it just obviously highlights the fact that this generation, it's an assumption for them that you're always having to improve something. And what that points to is a lack. It means you're not good enough. At its core, I am not good enough. And that is the single most destructive belief that any young woman can embody. I'm not good enough. As I am, I'm not good enough. And I myself struggled with that for many years. That's why I had eating disorders. I had many other things. But I worked through it. And today, I'm more than enough. But I see that pursuit of flawless and perfection, which a lot of brands obviously leverage and exploit, goes to the core of every woman, every girl deep inside who says, I am not enough. And that's what we want to change. You are enough.
Amazing. I love what you said. But before we end the podcast, I always do a last segment. It's called the 1%.
Okay.
99% of my podcast is all about women, but men are a part of our lives too. So this 1%, we want to give 1%.
That's very generous of you. 1%.
Okay. So this 1% is for the men in our lives. What is your advice to the men in your life or a life in general? What can they do better to support us?
Oh my God.
Oh,
How do we?
I
how
cannot
do we get
do
them?
that in one sentence. I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, listen, understand, do your own reading, do your own research, and have empathy. I mean, I just think that's one thing. Unfortunately, women just have more empathy. And it comes naturally to us. Maybe men need to use that muscle a little bit more because it doesn't come so naturally. So they need to learn to build empathy. Really have empathy. I think that would be the thing I would say.
I mean, I guess because I have a wild imagination, I imagine a social experiment where every man should be dressed up and, escorted out into the world and experience a day in the life of a woman.
I like that.
I think that would be really cool.
Men in high heels and skirts navigating their way around
Absolutely.
the mall.
The
I'd love to
whole
see
bit.
that.
With probably an apparatus that gives them the menstrual cramps as they walk as well. So,
and just sort of
Yeah.
heels and the handbag, you know what I mean? And the whole thing. I'd love to see it.
And hair flying everywhere.
How they manage, to cope
I
with
can
that.
kind of imagine it. Probably AI can design it for us.
Yeah, you're right. That would be fun.
Okay, so that's your 1% in terms of what you see. Brilliant. You both do a lot of content on menopausal awareness. What is that you want to achieve from that?
I want everyone to realize that menopause is something that is going to happen to you. I want every woman to be well informed about it so they know how to go through this time with as much ease as possible, to have all the tools that they go through it. And I want the world to just understand that menopause is a phase of a woman's life, and it's not something that you should be scared of, or something that should be taboo, or something that is seen as the end of something. That's really important. Menopause is not the end of womanhood. We really need to change that. Menopause is the start of a new chapter of womanhood. I call it enter the era of wisdom.
Amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Sue just said it all. But I mean, if I had to sort of try to distill it down, I would say we have to let women know menopause is not a disease that needs to be cured. It is not. It's a natural biological process. It's an invitation into, if you let it, one of the richest and most enriching phases of your life.
Amazing. I've had an amazing conversation with these two wonderful women with me. If you've been inspired or at least got 1% of excitement or probably a little bit of your, things that you had in your head cleared up, I think we've had a win-win. Until next time, menopause, why pause? Let's play.